Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I always find it, I guess, humbling in a way to be invited to speak to people in other parts of the world and to connect with them. After all, in my own head, I'm just a rock drummer in a in an imaginary rock band, and so sometimes this just shocks me for a moment. I'm like, what? I'm really doing this? This is crazy. Anyhow, welcome, and I would like to sort of give an understanding first of metaphysics. I mean, there's two ways to look at metaphysics. I'll give I guess, a definition, and then I'll give a simplified version. And so, metaphysics is to examine the fundamental nature of reality, including the relationship between mind and matter, between substance and attribute, and between potentiality and actuality. So that's a pretty wordy, kind of a bit of a word salad in terms of a definition. And the way I like to break it down is to simplify it. And I learned this from Reverend Rona Segura, is that how does this show up in me? So whenever I'm reading any kind of wisdom teachings, whenever there's a lesson involved, I try to see, well, how does this show up in me? How can I take this and apply it in my life as either an example of how I could live, an example of what's going on within me, or an example of how I might be able to heal something within me. So the Temple Beautiful is out of Acts 3, 1-10. It's also referred to as Peter heals a lame beggar. So what I'll do first is I'll read the scripture, and then we'll go back over it and break it down into terms that I think we can then play with it. And the great thing about all of this is that you get to say how it goes for you. Anytime you read any wisdom teaching, scriptures, whatever it is, you can apply it in whatever way you want. There's no rules. There's just ideas around it and some suggestions. But, as we pointed out in the beginning around freedom, we have the freedom to think and decide and choose whatever it is that works for us. So one day, Peter and John were going up to the temple. It's a time of prayer. It's 3 p.m. And now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for alms. Peter looked straight at him, as did John. Then Peter said, "Look at us." So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Then Peter said, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Stand up and walk." Taking him by the right hand, he helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. He jumped to his feet and began to walk. Then he went with them into the temple courts, walking and jumping and praising God. When all the people saw him walking and praising God, they recognized him as the same man who used to sit begging at the temple gate called Beautiful. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. So we can see this as a story about somebody begging, and we can take it literally as like, did this really happen? Did they just put out the right hand and raise him up, and suddenly he had this great ability to walk and dance and celebrate? And we can also take it apart a little bit using the teachings of Charles Fillmore and the Metaphysical Dictionary. And so in metaphysics, in what Charles and Myrtle created with Unity, is faith and love are represented by Peter and John. Peter being faith, John being love. And so we can see that what's happening here is actually faith and love are showing up in this scripture. Now, there's also some other things going on. First of all, they're going up to the temple gate. They're going up to do something at a very specific time of day. It's 3:00. They do this every day. So we can take that as there's a practice going on here. They're going to a temple, a sacred place, a place of connection. We can also take the Temple Beautiful and think of it as ourselves, that we are that temple. Again, so how is this showing up in me? Now, this person who is lame from birth, this represents, in my mind, disabled thoughts, activities that we have going on in our head where we're maybe neglectful, we're maybe ignorant, we're weakened by challenge, where we're unable to move forward. We might have fear or hatred or cruelty or prejudice, or any of these things can be showing up in our ideas. And as a result, we are in actuality lame to actually live our lives powerfully. Now, being carried up to the temple gate called Beautiful, this temple or this gate symbolizes spirituality understanding. And it's kind of like, I think of it as there's a line here that needs to be crossed. And it's interesting that every day this person is getting up to that line, but unable to step across that threshold. And I'm curious, have you ever had that in your life where you get stopped by something? You get stopped at a certain level. Maybe you've noticed a pattern in your life that you reach a certain way with people, or you have relationships get to a certain point, or maybe in your career you get to a certain success point, and there's something out there called self-sabotage, where we somehow manage to create an environment where maybe it doesn't work out to our highest truth or what we really wanted to have accomplished. And so I see this is that temple gate that this person is getting up to every single day, but they're unable to cross it. Now, this is where faith and love show up. And, this person is begging for something. So again, if we take this internally, looking to the outside world for something, right? Looking what out there can solve what's going on within me, as opposed to pulling from within. And this is where the right hand is put out. The right hand is, if you ever noticed in the court of law, the right hand, the accused is always sitting at the right hand of the judge, right? In court, the prosecution is always on the left. So this right hand is a symbol that we have taken through history as a place of good faith. And so the right hand is reached out to the person, and they embrace, and in that embrace of faith and love, something new comes in to this. Something new comes into this person. And as the story says, he's raised up, begins to jump up and down, and is able to suddenly cross that line, able to move into a new place within themselves in order to live their life. So if I were to summarize that quickly, it's sort of a story about a person that was begging for alms and received instead legs. And now the ability is within them to actually move into their life, right? It's sort of like you've now been given the ability to fish. That saying, right? Where instead of fishing for others, you teach them how to fish. This is that same kind of idea. Suddenly, this person has something from which to draw on that allows them to move to the next stage of life. And you might have noticed in your life that there always seems to be these ceilings that we hit, these areas that we get up to, and we need something a little more to move across. I think it was Einstein said that the problems that we have today are not going to be solved by the same thing that helped us create these problems, right? We need something more from ourselves in order to actually move beyond what is stopping us. And this is a great example of how we can take some spiritual principle and begin to apply it into our lives so that we can now have something to lean into. I'm sure you've all done a white stone ceremony at the start of the year and created a word for yourself or a phrase for yourself for the year. And, one of the things that we can do with that is actually lean into that phrase or that word. We can stop in a moment of frustration and ask a question. Well, in this example, how would faith show up here? How would love show up here? If I were to lean into that, what would be possible for me moving forward? So it's really, again, coming back to our thoughts, our thinking. And if we go back to the story, there's, there is a ritual of showing up every day at a temple. Yet what that, for me, it's not the fact that you're going there at 3 o'clock or you're going to a temple. It's a practice, right? It's a way of being that is non-negotiable. I am somebody that is able to build some discipline in my life. It's not negotiable as to whether I'm going to meditate and pray every day. It's just not negotiable. There's nothing that gets in the way of that happening in my life, because I've seen the person I was before taking that practice on and the person I've become from having that practice. And when I weigh the two out and I measure them, I go, oh, which guy would I rather be? Would I rather be the guy that wasn't doing that the way I showed up in the world before, or the person I am today? And I choose the person I am today. And so I've seen for myself that it's in the practice of having something in my life that supports me that actually allows me to hit those next ceilings. And then what gets me to that next place, it's probably going to require something different from me in order to move beyond it. Or maybe it requires me to even dig into that a little deeper. Maybe I need to go a little further within to find that. So this is really a story about a human experience. It's really about seeing, how is this in me? And how can I utilize this teaching for something that's going on in my life? Either maybe a relationship with somebody, again, whether it's in your work world, maybe it's in the family experience you might have overall, whatever that looks like. How can I take this and apply it? So if I was to rewrite the passage and personalize it, and I'll read from my screen here, I might say, when I am stopped in feeling unworthy or unable to raise myself up, I go within and call on faith and love to lift me up and move me forward to a new way of being. There is no thing in my life that cannot be healed in this manner. So if I were to take that even further into how can we move? So let me pause here. So I'll give this analogy. So you have it in your mind that you want to get in better shape. I'll use that because that's an easy one. I want to be healthier, or I want to get in better shape. So you might look at it and go, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? You begin to start to measure all of the work that's going to go into this. And it's going to take, 7 or 8 months before you really start to see the effect of this. And so you have this story going on in your head of how it's going to look and how am I going to get there. And, the weight, it starts to weigh on you, and not if you know what I'm talking about, so that I can see that it's like, you're all with me on this, right? I'm not the only one that experiences this. Like, I do like to check in and make sure it's not just me, because maybe it's just me. But you start to play with it. It's like, oh, this is going to be, how am I going to possibly do this? Oh my gosh. And then that begins to weigh down what your experience is, that enthusiasm that you may have had for this project called I'm going to get in better shape begins to wane, right? And it becomes easier to push it off. So what we really need to do, and the scripture is a great example, is we really need to live as though we're already that. So it's not in 7 or 8 months I'm going to be in shape. It's actually right now, when I sit on this bike, I am in shape. Because as soon as you start pedaling that bike, as soon as you start pushing that weight up in the air, as soon as you start running down the treadmill, you have already changed who you were the moment before. So I'm already this thing. I'm already better than I was, in the world of shape, in the world of fitness, than I was 2 minutes ago, because I've taken this step. And that's really what we see is the moment that faith and love show up and it's embraced, it's not that one day my life is going to change or be better. It's actually happening right now in the moment. So I'll give you an example. And the only way I can ever do this for some reason is to pull from my own personal life, because I don't know what other people experience. I only know my experience. And I have to throw some kudos to Martha Creek here as well, if you all know Martha Creek. So, I was not a spiritual, no, let me reframe that. I was not a religious person and wanting to find a spiritual home, but I stumbled across Unity and went, oh my gosh, this feels really great. So that was the spring of 2017. Never heard of Unity until then. And 6 months later, I decided I wanted to be a minister. Don't catch whatever I caught in that moment. So I began the journey. Now, I had all these SEE classes to do. It took me 18 months, a year and a half to do 18 SEE classes to qualify for ministerial school. And so I got accepted into ministerial. And it was really becoming overwhelming at this point. And I had a call with Martha Creek. And she was great, because she gave me the best coaching I could ever hear from somebody. She simply said, minister is a verb. Get out there and minister. You're already a minister. It's not, one day you're going to everything, and they're going to give you the little cloak and everything. But what you need to do right now is do what they ask you to do. And then when you're finished, you do what you're here to do. Right. So pass all the things, make sure you don't fight them. Like, don't be in all the disagreement, just do it. But you're already a minister. So get out there and minister. So I took that to heart, and I began talking and doing ministerial activities as if I already was. And then I just put my head down and did the classes. Like, what was next? There was no thinking about 3.5 years or 4 years that was in front of me. It was, what is next? I'm already doing it. And I don't know that I would have made it had that not been the state of mind that she showed me was possible. Because I have at that point, my daughters were 13, twin daughters. I had a business, I had a family to feed, I have a mortgage. Like, all of those things were in my world. And I was now adding this, as well as running my own business, feeding my family, taking care of all their needs, or being there as much as a father and husband as I could be, with all of this going on. And so the overwhelm could have been very present for me. And anytime that happened, I just had those words of one thing at a time. This is what I'm doing. I'm already it. And this is part of what it means to be a minister. I'm already it. This is part of it. It's not, I'm going to get there one day and be it. It's actually already happening. I am it. And then I just needed for the little, tap on the head from Unity to go, oh, now you've done it. And so what I see from this, so, there's the faith in knowing that we're doing our truth. So that's really what faith is for me. It's, I'm living my truth. I am truly drawing from within that which is mine to do. And I trust in that. I have a faith in that guidance. But the love part is really the harmonizing. It's not the love as in a relationship, as Fillmore talks about in the 12 Powers. It's the harmonizing aspect of love, becoming in harmony with that thing. And I harmonized with the idea of what it meant to be minister. I took it within and really owned it and harmonized with it. Anytime you're having a struggle with something, the idea is, how can I harmonize with this? So if we go back to your word of the year, whatever that is, if you're going into a meeting that could be, a little bit daunting, or there could be some fireworks, so to speak, lean into your word. How can my word of the year support me in this? I had a moment where I thought this was something I really wanted to lean into this year. Well, how can I harmonize with it and bring it into my meeting, that I am this very thing? And so we can draw on any principles or teachings that we might come across that align with the truth of who we are. And then in unity principles, principle number 5 is I live the truth I am. That means we got to get out of our head, right? Nothing happens in here but ideas. It doesn't happen till we put it into the world. And either we do that through our speaking or we do that through action. But if it's just in our head, it's not anything. It's just in our head. And it's a great place to have things, but they have to become real. They need to show up in the world. And that's on us to do that. That's our work, is to bring that to life and to be seen as that, not for others, but to be seen as that for ourselves. When you see yourself accomplish something, do you feel good about it? Right? It feels good. Hey, I said I was going to do this. I did it. Ever had those days where you had things that you wanted to do and then you just did nothing? And at the end, let me speak from personal experience. When I have a list of things to do and I slough them all off, and about 4 or 5 o'clock, I've done nothing, and my kids are going like, Dad, why are you being such a jerk? It's because I know I haven't lived into my own, what I said I would do. And so it shows up in me in that I'm frustrated and angry internally, and it shows up outside with other people. It has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with my own experience. And the more that we can look at ourselves and see who we are being and examine life, so to speak, that's when we are really able to show up for others. When we are willing to look at ourselves and go within and see that all of this stuff, everything that's happening in the world, is a result of my perception, what I'm seeing, what I'm willing to do, what I'm creating, my practices, all of those things. That's really what I can take away from Acts. So I have an invitation. I invite you all to see having faith as honoring the very same intelligence that put together all of this experience that we are having. The plants, the animals, you, me, the trillions of cells that make us up. The idea that every 7 years, every cell in our body has died off and been regenerated. Like that, if you think about that for a moment, it's incredible. And to see that faith is that nudge that says you can do this, right? You can be someone that serves others. You can play the game of life full out. Life being one of our 12 powers, right? That's like, we get to do this. That's one of my favorite sayings, is that I get to do this. Anytime I'm thinking that ministry is daunting, I can go back to, but wait, I actually get to do this. I wasn't on my agenda at one point, but now it is. And this is so much fun for me to be able to get together with all of you. And so to ever think of this as something other than I get to do this, if it's in my life, my gosh, that's for me. This is actually showing up for me. This experience is showing up for you. So with that in mind, why don't we take a few moments to bring some of that into ourselves at a deeper level, to experience faith and love, not in our heads, but to move them into a presence within, to see them for that full embodiment, that they can be. And so if you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. If that's uncomfortable for you, then just find a place in front of you where maybe you can soften your gaze. Allow your breathing to ease and settle. One thing I find very helpful is to make my exhales longer than my inhales. So you could count a breath in of 4 and exhale for a count of 7. And as you do that, you'll find that you relax a little deeper. And as you're enjoying this breath, I invite you to think of these words, that everything I want for myself and for my life are within me. Having the faith to know that you can call upon yourself. I invite you to place a hand on your heart space. Taking a moment to honor this beautiful heart that has served you every moment, every day of your life. Bringing into your awareness that this is where love resides. This is where that harmonizing power resides. And sometimes the hardest struggle we might have in front of us is moving from our head to our heart. And as we prepare to come back to our Zoom room, as you're ready on a breath in, you can open your eyes. Let's take a moment and share in some gratitude together, some gratitude for this time together, for each person that is here, our fellow meditators and spiritual journeyers. I don't think that's a word, but we'll use it today. Just filling ourselves up with this appreciation for this technology that has allowed us to connect, for this safe space that we can dwell in and speak freely in. And for that, we say, thank you, Spirit. Namaste.